empty at some point, squeezed out and useless. Not every piece of packaging makes such a spectacular exit. Millions of packages in Germany simply feel empty at some point, squeezed out and useless. The result is 2.5 million tons of packaging waste each year that ends up in the yellow bag or the yellow bin. And from there to a sorting plant. The problem is different kinds of plastic are difficult to separate from each other and from other materials. That's why most waste ends up being used for energy recovery. The empty packaging is burned for energy in conventional power plants, for example, or in the steel or cement industry. At this sorting plant in southern Hessen, the Milo company plans to greatly increase the proportion of reusable waste, the kind that can be recycled into new products. Waste is collected from yellow bags and yellow bins in the surrounding region. The problem is, the waste contains material that doesn't belong here, like non-returnable packaging and a large amount of other household waste as well. This bottle belongs in the yellow bin. It's made of high-density polyethylene, also known as HDPE. As does this bottle made of polyethylene terephthalate, or PET. And this bottle cap made of polypropylene, or PP for short. These reusable plastics are mixed up with other materials. A homogeneous stream of material gets sorted out later in the process. First, the waste is gathered from a 300-kilometer radius that includes the states of Bavaria, Baden-Württemberg, Rhineland-Pfalz, and Hessen. 120 tons of waste are gathered each year. That equals around 5% of the waste collected in yellow bags and bins across Germany. The sorting takes place almost automatically. In a large machine hall, the flow of waste runs over a 2.5-kilometer long conveyor belt. In the first stage, the material falls into a large rotary sieve. Here, the various packaging and other materials are sorted out according to size. Smaller pieces simply fall through the holes. The rest is transported to 2 additional drums. Finally, 5 separate streams are created containing different sized material. Separating the material by size makes further sorting procedures much easier. In a special air separator, a blast of wind blows lighter material, such as foil, out of the material stream. The air separator and other machines remove most of the foil from the material stream. That makes the hard plastic easier to sort out. The more thoroughly the plastic is sorted out, the better it can later be used to create high-quality products. In a further stage, an infrared scanner quickly scans for types of plastic. Air pressure can then shoot out the PP bottle caps, for example. Then comes the PET, and finally HDPE is sorted out of the material flow. Despite the automated sorting process, the already well-sorted material streams are then picked through by hand. The most useful plastics stay on the belt. Around 1/3 of the total initial material, however, consists of mixed plastics and residual waste that has no further use. Everything from old shoes to pieces of wood. It's all destined for energy recovery, incineration. Packaging from the yellow bin is put through more than 30 sorting procedures at the plant in Gansheim. Along with HDPE, PP, and PET waste, there are 4 other plastic fractions here. The sorted plastic is pressed into bales. The HDPE, PP, and PET bales have a purity level of 94 to 98%. This well-sorted plastic waste is a sought-after secondary raw material in the plastic processing industry. The plant in Hessen supplies companies in Germany and in neighboring countries. HDPE bottles, for example, are used to make pipes or specialized pallets. PP plugs are often turned into flower pots or buckets. And PET packaging is turned into fibers used in fleece sweaters or into stylish lawn furniture. But even if the furniture looks great and the sweater is comfortable, these products only have a limited lifespan within this kind of material recycling. Producing these products may save raw materials such as oil, but at some point, they too will end up in the dump or waste incineration plant. Despite all the sorting, a full-fledged material cycle for plastic packaging has not yet been created. To create a genuine cycle, that means a bottle is made into another bottle, the sorted plastic fractions need further processing. Systec Plastics in Thuringia is doing just that at a special plant in the town of Eisfeld. First, HDPE bottles end up here in a shredder. The resulting plastic shreds are cleaned of any shampoo, yogurt, or any other residue. And a special procedure sorts out the last unwanted remains. The result is a colorful mixture of cleaned flakes that are made almost entirely out of HDPE. These still have to be sorted out by color. If they were melted down as is, they'd turn a dirty gray. This color sorting takes place in a special sorter. Special mechanics allow the machine to isolate single flakes from a large mass. HDPE particles are run over a slide piece by piece. Tens of thousands per minute. LEDs light up the material stream, while sensors recognize the different colors. The data is analyzed by a computer, which controls a panel fitted with more than 60 compressed air nozzles. A blast of air shoots out the unwanted colors. Only the colorless flakes remain, if so desired. After this process is carried out over the first 2 slides, it's repeated on the next 2. And a final repetition on the last one. The result is an output of 800 kilograms of sorted HDPE flakes per hour with a purity level well above 99%. The material is melted at 220 degrees Celsius in an extruder. The melt is pressed through a filter and once again purified. Then the liquefied plastic is cooled and processed into granules. The result is a high-quality raw material that is put to use nearly everywhere in the plastics industry. Besides HDPE packaging, polypropylene, or PP caps, are put through these elaborate cleaning, sorting, and processing stages as well. Every year, around 20,000 tons of material from the yellow sack is processed here in Eisfeld. But only a small portion gets the full treatment. Production capacity is set to increase in the future, and the procedure is to be further improved. We can already take plastic from the yellow bag and turn it back into plastic. We now plan to enter areas related to the food industry. We'll start with cosmetics, then move on to food at some point. We think it'll take a few years, and then our plastic will be hygienic enough for that. Recycled material from Eisfeld is already sought after by the makers of washing and cleaning products. At its location in Mainz, the Werner and Matz company produces more than 130,000 tons of foamy and fragrant detergents. Normally, the packaging ends up in the yellow bag. To complete the material cycle, the company tries to use as much plastic as possible from the yellow bag to produce its bottles. The HDPE granulate from Eisfeld is fed here into a machine. It's then melted in a special extruder. The bottles are formed under air pressure. Afterwards, excess material is trimmed off, and the bottles are ready. Even though these bottles were made using only recycled plastic from the yellow bag, any standard production facility could manufacture them. Finally, the HDPE bottles are filled up as usual and delivered to shops. 5.5 million bottles each year. It's not only HDPE bottles that are made of recyclable material. These PP caps are also produced using 100% plastic from the yellow bag. Once again, it's recycled granulate from Eisfeld that does the job. We use recycled material from the yellow bag for our PET and HDPE bottles and for our PP caps, and we hope to increase this share in the future. We're still looking for market partners in this initiative in order to further lower recycling material costs. In other words, the more packaging producers use recycling material from the yellow bag, the greater the production capacity will grow, making it more economical to use this recycled material. At Werner and Metz, PET bottles make up a large share of packaging. Despite all the sorting with high-tech machinery, adequate quantities of PET granulate from the yellow bag still aren't available. So PET granulate from the yellow bag is mixed with PET granulate from the deposit system, mostly made from empty beverage bottles. The preforms from the first production stage in Mainz are blown into bottles and later filled. In the end, they're made of 20% PET plastic from the yellow bag and 80% plastic from the deposit system. More than 80 million bottles are produced this way each year at the plant in Mainz. The company aims to gradually increase the share of PET bottles made with yellow bag material, while at the same time using more of this high-quality recycled plastic for all of its packaging. That means an HDPE bottle is made from another HDPE bottle, a PP cap from a PP cap, and a PET bottle from another PET bottle. That preserves the raw materials and energy invested in plastic production. Until now, only a fraction of packaging from the yellow bag and bin got recycled. But experience shows that plastic from the yellow bag can be used in a material cycle. And no matter how unspectacular the shot, at least it's one bottle more.
Plastics recycling is failing. Globally, over 350 million metric tons of plastic are produced annually, but according to the OECD, only 14 to 18% of that is recycled. In the US, it's even bleaker. The recycling rate stands at about 8.4%, a number that has been on the decline even as the public has become more aware of the plastic waste crisis.
While we're also shocked at the amount of plastic waste we generate each day, virgin plastic production keeps increasing 4 or 5% year over year.
China used to be able to profitably recycle much of the world's plastic waste, but that came to a halt in 2018, and now we have to deal with it domestically. Problem is, most plastics just aren't recyclable, and even those that are degrade in quality each time they're remade, meaning they'll eventually end up in the landfill too.
So we can't recycle our way out of this problem.
Or can we? Mechanical recycling won't save us. That is, chopping plastic up, melting it down, and remaking it the way that we do now. Instead, the industry is betting big on something called chemical recycling, which can handle all types of plastic waste.
This new technology can take those plastics, break them down into the raw materials, and make brand new quality plastics out of them, which gives you a much bigger expansion in terms of potential end markets.
With governments around the world increasingly banning single-use plastics, industry groups like the American Chemistry Council are hoping that chemical recycling can save both the industry and the environment. Companies like Brightmark, Plastic Energy, and Agilix are now trying to turn plastic into fuel and plastic back into plastic.
We are going to have plastics in the environment for the foreseeable future, and I want to find what is the most optimal way to reduce waste and increase the environmental sustainability aspect of those products that we use.
But skepticism abounds. After all, plastic made from scratch is actually cheaper than recycled plastic. So how will the economics even work out? And can turning plastic into fossil fuels really be considered recycling? Shouldn't we just focus on producing less in the first place? It's up for debate. There are thousands of varieties of plastics, but 7 main categories, of which only 2 can be recycled by traditional means: PET, which water bottles are made of, and HDPE, used in things like milk jugs and shampoo containers. Sorting plastics and removing contamination is labor-intensive work. And so, since the 1980s, the United States, alongside other nations like the UK and Australia, sent much of its plastic waste to China, where cheap labor allowed Chinese producers to profitably recycle it. But as single-stream recycling became the norm, and plastic was thrown in the same bin as glass, cardboard, and other materials, China noticed increasingly high contamination levels. After years of warning, the country set strict new contamination limits on imports that were nearly impossible to meet, leaving wealthy nations scrambling to find new overseas markets.
What we have done over the last few years is to export to countries that they had less infrastructure of what we have, and then creating a much bigger problem.
So why not just develop the infrastructure to deal with it locally? Basically, mechanical recycling in the US just isn't profitable without incentives or subsidies.
Virgin plastic is incredibly cheap, and we are seeing traditional mechanical recycling operations shutting down because it simply does not pay. They cannot sell their recycled plastic at a rate that would justify paying people to collect it.
But even as states like California try to prop up their curbside recycling programs and centers with subsidies, there's still just so much that can go wrong. While number 1 and number 2 plastics are recyclable, about 70% end up in a landfill or incinerator anyway.
It's too contaminated or it's too difficult to separate, and then the recycled polymer is sort of low grade. And then on top of that, it's typically too expensive.
Absent strong regulation, public pressure, or true altruism, there's just no reason why a corporation would pay more for lower quality recycled plastic.
So we need to find something else. And then, of course, something else would be switch materials or source reduction, use less. But obviously, that would be bad news for the plastic industry. So I think they see the only way forward is chemical recycling.
Enter chemical recycling, a process that can break down any plastic, type 1 through 7, into its molecular building blocks, and then theoretically convert it into virgin quality plastic, chemicals, or diesel and petrol fuels.
There's been a huge investment in these chemical recycling technologies in recent years. They've been very hyped by industry. They're saying that these technologies are going to allow them to capture a much broader stream of plastics and turn them back into plastics like new, so we could get more of a circular economy with that.
The most common technology used in this process, pyrolysis, is not new. It involves heating up a material like waste plastic in an oxygen-starved environment, which causes it to break down into a mix of simpler compounds, which are then used as building blocks for new products. But critiques abound. Tongri's organization, the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, or GAIA, recently released a report which concluded that no chemical recycling facility in the US is turning plastic back into plastic at a commercial scale yet, though there's been many attempts. Of the 37 chemical recycling facilities proposed in the US since 2000, GAIA reports that only 3 are operational, and they're mostly turning plastic into fuel, which the organization calls the opposite of an eco-friendly solution. The companies themselves, though, beg to differ. Brightmark, founded in 2016, is building a commercial-scale plastics-to-fuel plant in Ashley, Indiana, and aims to process 100,000 tons of plastic by 2021. It will sell fuel from this plant to BP.
So ultimately, our goal is to produce less combustible fuels. There are at least 14% less greenhouse gas emissions associated with the fuels that we produce versus pulling crude oil or natural gas out of the ground.
In addition to fuels, Brightmark's process also produces paraffin waxes, and Powell says the tech is ready to convert plastic back into plastic. They just need customers.
I think the market is there, and I think what you would see from us in the future is relationships with folks that achieve our goals around circularity and their goals around circularity, because we can do it now.
But in the meantime, Tongri questions whether turning plastic into fossil fuel is really a solution worth supporting.
Is plastic to fuel better than, say, I don't know, syngas derived from coal? Yeah, probably, but who uses that? It's on its way out. These are not clean fuels. Whether they are absolutely the dirtiest, or they're the second dirtiest, or they're the third dirtiest, they're clearly fossil fuels, and they are highly contaminated fossil fuels.
Then there's UK-based Plastic Energy, which is turning plastic back into plastic on a commercial scale at 2 facilities in Spain.
We targeted to have a processing capacity sometime by 2023 of about 300,000 tons of end-of-life plastics per year.
Much like Brightmark, the company started off producing fuels, also through a pyrolysis-based process that converted plastic waste into naphtha and diesel. But now, Montreal says they're totally focused on plastic-to-plastic recycling.
Since April this year, 100% of our tech oil is used to create new plastics. We are committed to the creation of a circular economy for plastics going forward.
Montreal says that Europe's ambitious environmental goals provide unique incentives for this type of technology to flourish.
We have commitments to double the recycling quotas in Europe from about 5 million today per year to 10 million tons per year by 2025.
He also cites Europe's high landfilling fees and multi-stream recycling infrastructure as advantageous. With plastic, glass, and cardboard already separated at the source, Plastic Energy can acquire difficult-to-recycle plastics more easily and economically than in the U.S. As the company tries to increase its processing capacity by over 2,000% in the next 3 years, it may face competition from Oregon-based Agilix, which is also trying to turn plastics back into plastics and is looking to expand internationally.
We have a pathway and a roadmap to take plastic recycling from the current 10% to upwards of 90%.
Agilix was one of the earliest companies in this space. Founded in 2004, it ran a plastics-to-fuel operation until 2015, providing jet fuel to the Department of Defense. Low oil prices forced the company to pivot, and now Agilix specializes in converting polystyrene back into styrene, which is used to make disposable cups, takeout containers, and packing foam. Agilix is often hailed as a leader in the space, but Gaia has called its efficiency into question, reporting that only 1/10 of the waste that Agilix processed in 2018 was actually turned into styrene, a figure that the company disputes.
So yes, they were significantly off on the yield numbers. And if our yields were in a 10 to 20% range, we would not have an economic plastic recycling pathway that the top companies in polystyrene have embraced.
While Gaia says the company has not proven that it's capable of recycling plastic on a commercial scale, Agilix is planning to expand its capacity across the US, Europe, and Asia, in conjunction with a number of petrochemical partners such as America's Styrenics and INEOS.
The facility in Chicago that we're developing with INEOS Styrolution will be 100 tons per day, 10 times the size of our Tigard, Oregon facility. And as we replicate those, the scale of our recycled styrene will begin to have a significant impact on the market.
Cooper says the company hasn't run a life cycle analysis to see how its recycled polystyrene compares to virgin polystyrene, but estimates the process to be between 40 to 70% cleaner. This number, too, is up for debate. But it's more than just a disagreement over statistics. Fundamentally, it's a disagreement over priorities. Basically, there's not a consensus on whether chemical recycling will represent an important part of the plastic waste solution or an expensive distraction from what many believe ought to be the real priority, making less plastic.
There are people who embrace chemical recycling as an emerging technology with an evolution path. There are others more focused on reducing the amount of plastics that we use as a country and as a world.
Not surprisingly, there's big policy disagreements as well. For example, the fact that plastic industry groups enthusiastically support chemical recycling while opposing policies like single-use plastic bans or plastic taxes leaves many skeptical that the industry would ever pursue eco-friendliness over profits.
The industry is investing so much money in chemical recycling because they really want to convince us that they can continue to churn out ever large quantities of plastic and solve the problem downstream.
Tongri and many other environmentalists believe that instead of pursuing chemical recycling, the plastic waste problem is best addressed through legislation, in particular, extended producer responsibility laws that force plastic producers to bear the cost for the environmental impacts of their products.
There are proposals that would impose a tax on plastic producers proportional to the environmental and health harm that they cause.
The idea is that this would lead to less plastics production overall, drive growth in the market for plastic alternatives, and incentivize consumers to turn to reusable materials instead. But many champions of chemical recycling support a more free market approach.
If virgin plastics cost more because there's a tax on them, that helps us out. But I think that open market competition is really the true way in the long run to foster the innovation and the efficiency to drive higher recycling rates across all plastic types.
Cooper's position is shared by industry groups like the American Chemistry Council and the Plastics Industry Association, who say that consumer demand and corporate pledges will make recycled plastic an attractive option, even if virgin plastic remains cheaper. Others, though, say legislation and chemical recycling both have a role to play.
Regulatory and governmental frameworks have really driven us to where we're at the point now where there is an absolute demand to deal with the issues of post-use plastics. In the future, maybe there won't be a need for plastics and we find a better way of doing things. But for the foreseeable, we are going to have plastics in the environment. And so what we do is already environmentally better. It will ultimately get even better as time goes on.
But for now, serious doubts about chemical recycling's efficacy, environmental footprint, and scalability remain, leading many to withhold support in favor of starting with simpler solutions.
Overall, I always like to start with the easiest, most obvious solutions. And I think there are many, many places where we could just use less plastic without compromising our quality of life. But I think it'll take a lot more than just coming up with a handful of amazing technologies to fix this.
We've come to throw in our son of my head, in a diriki and Ocean, Ikube, Ilube, Itoniki, in a Tufiat, in a Dube Kushiliakayat. Father, we've come to draw. We draw from you. I renew the strength of it. We've gone to draw. We draw from you again. Atabahile kundi pitie. Ikubaena. Inabayati yanamananti piet. Ikikua. Itunitie. Ikabakumbelekebeketi Asanti Isonamata Etabakabakondi Esutiatu Ekobianana Ekosia Eno Ikumba Satabelakobetus Asalamanamante Elokimana Itombe Asatabalabata Ekubiosa Ilobiko Amamamamakos has come to draw, we draw from you again. Abe is here again. I draw from you again. youth again. Holy Spirit, Spirit, fill your church again. We want to see Jesus and the Spirit flow in our women again. For righteousness is out, not on me. He give me a mama no. We want to see Jesus and the Spirit flow in our children again. I am a me. Echo. He give me the stop the baton. He come here. Echo man a man. He goes set up. Son of a man. Hey yeah. Hey yeah 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 yeah. I am. It's on the near. Son of a man. Sing me another. Holy Spirit, Spirit, fill your church again. We want to see Jesus and the Spirit flow in our youth again. Holy Spirit, hello, in the Monday. Help me never to betray you, Lord. Help me never to betray you, Lord. Always keep me at my post. Oh, Jesus, I'm your sacrifice. Take me and pour me out. Righteousness exalts a nation. Teach me your ways, oh. Show me your path, oh. At the back of my car, in the crew, he give me keys, he give me things, Yanama. Hello, son, I am a living, giving God. I am Abba.
Hi, welcome to Introduction to Spanish. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Leah. In this series, you'll learn everything you need to know to get started learning Spanish.
That's right. And we're here to help guide you through your journey. In this lesson, you'll learn the reasons why you should start learning Spanish, about the different types of Spanish dialects, and how to get started. There are many reasons you should start learning Spanish. Did you know? Spanish is the second most spoken language in the entire world. There are even more native speakers of Spanish than there are native speakers of English. Knowing Spanish allows you to communicate with more people.
And Spanish isn't just a language, but a culture and a way of living.
Many cultural experiences, modes of thinking, and ways of living can only truly be understood by speakers of a given language.
When we are thinking, we use our native language to do so. But if you learn another language and become multilingual, you can actually choose to think in another language. Just imagine what it'd be like thinking to yourself in Spanish.
Things that are inherent in language, such as degrees of politeness or gender classes in everyday nouns, impact the way people in that culture interact with one another. Thinking in another language allows you to see why people in that culture do things the way that they do. Learning a new language then provides a new way for you to see life, and this ultimately helps you to grow as a person.
If you like to travel, then you must know how important language is. This is particularly true for Spanish-speaking countries.
Unlike many other countries around the world, the majority of people in most Spanish-speaking countries have a very poor ability to speak English. If you hope to interact with locals in most Spanish-speaking countries, it's crucial that you learn how to communicate in Spanish.
And considering that Spanish is the second most spoken language in the world, you're missing out on a lot of what Spanish culture has to offer if you don't know how to speak Spanish.
If you're eager to travel and see the world, learning Spanish may be the catalyst you need to kickstart your journey, and perhaps one day make that dream a reality.
Did you know the Spanish spoken in Mexico isn't exactly the same as the Spanish spoken in Spain? Spanish is a super language that spans multiple continents.
There are some differences in the language based on region, but these differences will only reveal themselves to you once you start learning Spanish. The beauty of it is that once you learn standard Spanish, you'll be able to understand any Spanish-speaking person, regardless of where they're from.
Some dialects and accents, however, can be more easily understood than others.
Mexican Spanish, Argentinian, and Spanish from Chile, for example, are generally easier to understand because they're spoken slower and words are pronounced more clearly.
Interestingly, Argentinian Spanish has a big Italian influence, so there are many uses of Italian words in the language itself. This makes it easier for people who know Italian to learn and understand Argentinian.
In this series, we'll teach you the most universal form called Standard Spanish, and this will ensure that you'll be able to communicate with Spanish speakers from all over the world.
Learning a new language is just a matter of having a good learning method, practice, and time.
Let's begin by teaching your first few words in Spanish.
In reality, though, you most likely know some Spanish already. Everybody knows patio, hola, and fiesta. Let's teach you something that you might not know, but which is very useful. Muchas gracias. It means thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
This is perhaps the most useful phrase to learn since it's used a lot in Spanish.
Always answer muchas gracias to show your appreciation. Muchas gracias.
Now you try.
Muchas gracias. Muchas means many, and gracias means thanks. So the phrase muchas gracias literally means many thanks. Muchas gracias.
Repeat after Leah.
Muchas gracias.
Keep repeating until you get it.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, one last time.
Muchas gracias.
Well done. Now you know how to say thank you in Spanish. We've covered a lot of things already, so why don't we wrap up the first lesson and recap what we've learned? In this lesson, you learned the benefits of studying Spanish, the different dialects in Spanish, and how to say thank you in Spanish.
Muchas gracias.
See you in the next lesson. Bye.
Bye.
Hi. Welcome to Introduction to Spanish. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Leah.
In this lesson, you'll learn the basics of Spanish pronunciation. Spanish is a rich language that's decorated with a wide variety of accents and dialects. Since accents and dialects play a huge role in pronunciation, let's take a more detailed look at the different types of accents and dialects of Spanish from around the world.
First off, an accent is just a particular way of pronouncing words, like tomato or tomato. They may sound slightly different from one another, but all the rules that govern their use in the language are essentially the same.
Dialects, on the other hand, may branch off from the standard language by differing in grammar, word order, and of course pronunciation as well. Therefore, it's generally harder to understand a dialect than an accent.
First, let's make some distinctions as to how we refer to the Spanish language. First, español. Español is generally used to refer to the Spanish language as a supergroup. This includes all varieties of Spanish spoken in Spain and internationally. Beneath that is Castilian, which is the actual term used to exclusively refer to the Spanish spoken in Spain.
Mexican Spanish is a dialect of Spanish that is spoken in Mexico. Unsurprisingly, due to its proximity to the USA, Mexican Spanish uses far more English words than other dialects of Spanish.
Another example, which we mentioned in the previous episode, is Argentinian. Argentinian is another dialect of Spanish spoken in Argentina, and it closely resembles Italian because a huge wave of Italians migrated to Argentina during the 20th century. So Argentinian actually sounds a bit like Italian.
Pace is a very important aspect of Spanish because it varies greatly depending on the dialect of Spanish spoken.
The Spanish is almost renowned for being a fast-paced language.
The pace greatly depends on the region, however, as people in Mexico and some South American countries generally speak slower than speakers from Spain.
In some Spanish-speaking countries, it's common practice to shorten words. For example, words ending in an S will instead have the final vowel prolonged. Casas, for instance, would be pronounced casa.
We also mentioned before that some dialects of Spanish are influenced by other languages, such as Italian and English. Mexican Spanish uses a lot of English words, and English, being considered a slower-paced language, slows down the pace of the language. And that's one of the reasons Mexican Spanish is slower than the Spanish spoken in Spain.
The pace of Spanish, then, depends greatly on the dialect of Spanish.
For the most part, English and Spanish share a lot of the same sounds, which generally correspond to the same letters.
Thankfully, learning Spanish pronunciation is much easier than English pronunciation. Learning English is more a matter of memorization and practice, whereas Spanish is a combination of learning and practice. It takes much longer for a student to learn English pronunciation than Spanish pronunciation.
That's because there are many more irregular pronunciations of words in English than there are in Spanish. Take these words, for example. The first word is pronounced colonel, not colonel. The second word is pronounced arise. Adding an N, however, doesn't give you arisen, but arisen. The last word is pronounced ate, but adding an H doesn't give you hate. Instead, it becomes height.
Spanish, on the other hand, can mostly be pronounced as it's read. Almendra. The word almendra, meaning almond, is pronounced al-men-dra. It's pronounced exactly the same as it's written. Almendra. The same thing happens with the word carretera, meaning road. Carretera, it's pronounced ca-re-te-ra. Exactly how it's written. Carretera.
That's a good example, which demonstrates sounds that do not exist in English.
That's right. The double R here is a rolled R. It can be a little tricky for some learners. Carretera. Another common word is perro, meaning dog. Perro. Perro.
The trick is to build pressure at the point of contact, using the tip of your tongue to contact the top teeth and gum ridge, and then releasing the pressure quickly by flicking the tongue up and back. When you release the pressure, allow only the smallest amount of air to pass through, so that a tiny passage opens and closes rapidly. This should cause the tongue to vibrate or roll correctly. Try again.
Perro. Perro.
Well done! Let's wrap up this lesson by recapping what we've learned. In this lesson, you learned about accents and dialects in Spanish, that the spoken pace depends on the dialect, and that Spanish is mostly pronounced as it's written. Hi! Welcome to Introduction to Spanish. My name is Alicia, and I'm joined by...
Hi everyone, I'm Leah.
In this lesson, you'll learn the basics of Spanish grammar. Word order refers to the order in which words are structured to form a sentence in a given language. Consider the English sentence, I read books. If we break down the English sentence, I read books, we can see that the subject I is presented first, followed by the verb read, and then finally the object, books, is positioned last. The basic word order for English, then, is subject, verb, object, or SVO for short.
Now, let's compare that same sentence, I read books, in Spanish. Yo leo libros. If we break down the Spanish sentence, we get the subject, yo, meaning I. Then comes the verb, leo, meaning read. And finally, we have the object, libros, meaning books. The word order for basic Spanish then is subject, verb, object, or SVO for short.
As you can see, the word order for sentences in Spanish is the same as that of English. This means that you can essentially swap out English words for Spanish words in an English sentence to convert it to Spanish. So imagine you wanted to say, I ate an apple, but in Spanish. Just swap out the words.
I in Spanish is yo. Ate in Spanish is comí. An is una, and apple is manzana. Altogether, it's yo comí una manzana.
So, I ate an apple in Spanish is
yo comí una manzana.
You can form nearly all basic sentences in Spanish just
With the second highest death toll of all African conflicts, the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War, is perhaps the single most significant event in Nigerian history. This 3-year conflict, which raged on from the 6th of July 1967 till the 15th of January 1970, would claim the lives of over 100,000 soldiers and an estimated 2 million civilians, as the Nigerian government led by General Yakubu Gowon fought to prevent the secession of the self-proclaimed Republic of Biafra, which was led by General Chukwuemeka Odumegu Ojukwu. To fully understand the root cause of this brutal conflict, we need to go all the way back to the very beginning. Upon gaining independence from Great Britain in 1960, the newly formed Nigerian Republic was greatly divided, as its 3 largest ethnic groups struggled to live in harmony. Beyond the more obvious distinctions like language, clothing, and marriage customs, Nigeria's 3 main ethnic groups also had fundamental differences in values and worldviews, which had been developed over the many centuries leading up to the colonial era and the formation of the Nigerian state. The Igbos, who represented about 60 to 70% of the population of the southeast, were mostly Christians who in the centuries before the colonial era had lived in relatively egalitarian societies. Although most Igbo towns and villages were headed by monarchs known as Ezes, the political decision-making process within Igbo communities was actually quite democratic, as it involved general assemblies composed of title holders and other respected members of Igbo society. Status was acquired through one's ability to solve societal issues, and respect was given primarily to those who had acquired wealth, as opposed to those who had simply inherited it. The character of Okonkwo in the book Things Fall Apart by renowned Nigerian author Chinua Achebe was in many ways the perfect illustration of the uniquely Igbo vision of the self-made man. The Igbo's particular appreciation for wealth creation through hard work is undoubtedly the main